All right, we will try this again now that I have a audio that theoretically works. And unfortunately, oh, here we go. Looks like at least Janine has been able to make it in, so welcome in, Janine. And I can tell that you can hear me because I can hear myself, so I will mute this because I don't need to hear myself talk as much as I enjoy the sound of my own voice. Humbly at that. Hopefully other people can find their way in here. In the meantime, since I can be heard, good evening YouTube and all of my subscriber family. This is Garrett with Houses on Wheels, and I apologize for the complications that arose there with my audio for those who had the unfortunate opportunity to experience that. But audio is now taken care of. In my last, and not by last I don't mean the previous one, but in my last live stream from last week, I mentioned that I wanted to start a new tradition with you, my viewers, a potentially weekly live stream event called Freedom Friday. Being someone who is employed full-time with a Monday through Friday job, which I am grateful to have, Friday is already a day to look forward to, because at the end of my shift comes the start of my weekend. But how much greater of a day Friday would be if, Lord willing, this Freedom Friday event is successful and really takes off. Of course, it goes without needing to mention it, but I love having any opportunity to directly interact to you, my YouTube viewers and subscriber family. So, what is different about Freedom Friday compared to other opportunities that I have had to interact with you? Allow me to answer this question after a quick break from the script here to respond to live chat. And Martha says, I'm back with some coffee. You know what? I actually don't have coffee on me right now. I might have to get some in a little while when I meet up with a friend of mine. In fact, I'm surprised I haven't heard from him yet, because I was going to let him know that I need to delay our get-together for probably about 45 minutes, because I'm a bit 45 minutes late on this. I also would like to say hello to Van Dweller Chris. It's a shame we couldn't meet up when I was on my road trip, but it's good to have you in here. Oh, and with that said, there was something else I also wanted to mention. And that is that I understand that it's November, but it was snowing today, which is very unusual for the Pacific Northwest, at least in the Seattle area of the Pacific Northwest. Not used to it snowing. But on the good side of things, it's nice and toasty warm in my vehicle, whereas it's not so much out there. It's about 37 last time I checked, which isn't cold to me, but it's not exactly warm. Yeah, anyway, I've also got my fire going in my fireplace, which I'm rather happy about. One thing I do want to mention also from the live stream, actually it wasn't from last week, it was just from, what, Monday, Tuesday, something like that. One little update, and I think I can speak for all of us when I say that our prayers and thoughts are still going out to all the victims of the Manhattan terrorist attack. Yeah, but little bit of an update. I found, and this isn't the only article that covers this, but I like USA Today's article on this about Ryan Nash. He is the police officer who was able to shoot the terrorist in the stomach twice, I believe, in order to disable him enough to arrest him. And of course, the terrorist was taken into the hospital and whatnot. But it's not really a long post, but I'm just going to read the portion that I wanted to read. And it says, a New York City police officer was being hailed as a hero Wednesday for confronting and shooting the man accused of a Manhattan terror attack that killed 8 people and wounded 12 others. Ryan Nash, 28, is a decorated 5-year veteran of the force stationed in Lower Manhattan. He was a hero, Government Andrew Cuomo said. I think Officer Nash showed how important patrol officers are and how talented they are and how brave. So we all applaud and congratulate him. And rightfully so. And I would like to also say that our thoughts and prayers are to Ryan. Thank you, sir. You are an example of why I highly respect all officers, all police officers, all firefighters, and all emergency response and their team. So, thoughts and prayers out to you as well, my brother in the force. And with that said, I guess we can go ahead and go, real quick, I want to respond to a few more super chats. Not super chats, but live chats. I also want to say hello to Shiloh. I'm glad you can make it, and same with Jeff. So glad to have you here. And yes, Martha says, bless everyone affected by the attack. And I agree. And that goes out to the friends and family members of the victims. And even, possibly even the terrorist family, the ones who are not directly associated to him and his evil doings, who said he was proud that he did what he did. I imagine that, at least I'm hoping, and please do not get me wrong when I say this, because I'm hoping that there are people in his family, because he supposedly brought something like 21 other people with him. So my hope and my prayer is that not all of them view his sort of lifestyle the same way. In fact, I'm hoping that some of them are actually appalled at what he did. And if that's the case, I want to offer my thoughts and prayers to them as well, because, I think that's important. I think it's important. And also, hello to Driving My Home. Happy Friday to you as well. I'll be honest with you guys, and of course, I always do my absolute best to be honest and genuine. I'm going to be a little bit scattered. I did not have as much time to prep for this live stream as I normally want to for Freedom Friday, simply because honestly, I had to call in from work today because my shoulders and my neck were acting up like they did several months ago, and it took me like an hour and a half to get out of bed. But I've seen the chiropractor twice. They only actually charged me for 1 visit, which is really nice of them. It's very generous. So my props to them. And they also gave me an ice pack, a really nice one. It's very nice of them. Very nice of them. And I'm feeling much better. I'm not 100%. I might only be about 40%, but it is so much better. The only problem is, between that and fiddling with some new equipment that I'm slowly getting in to be able to give you really awesome quality live streams, the audio quality here in the next live stream that I do. I've got a new digital mixer that's coming in, and it's run completely by USB, but supposedly it's amazing for podcasts, and I'm so excited. I just got this desk-mounted microphone arm. So you can be expecting some well, not expecting, but you can be looking forward to some incredible sound in comparison to what you hear off of this digital headset. So I just want to mention that. Also, thank you, Janine, for your super chat donation. I greatly appreciate that. And that's a great segue into this. And thank you, Maggie. Maggie says, I hope you feel 100% soon. I very much appreciate that. Also, hello to Jeep Things Outdoors, Mr. Johnny. He says, hi, Garrett. But that's another segue I wanted to get into. I didn't know exactly when I wanted to mention it, but I'll mention it now. All the money that is earned through this live stream, at least up to for this month, I mean, because if this Freedom Friday goes on and on and on, several months or even a couple of years down the road and whatnot, it's going to be hard to keep track of where all the donations go, depending on where I dedicate them. But at least for this month, maybe I can even keep track of it for next month. I'm not sure yet. Of course, I'll always keep you guys in the loop on where all the earnings go and whatnot, as I did the last time. But all donations, all YouTube ads, assuming that they find this live stream to be worthwhile, which they should, but they might not, and that's fine too. But any earnings that I receive through this live stream, Freedom Friday, is going to be dedicated 100% to some sort of charitable cause that directly deals with either active military or some sort of veteran organization. I'm not sure yet. I haven't chosen one, but I just want to let you know now that all income that I receive from this video will go directly to the military in some way, shape, or form. So, and there's reason for that. And I'm going to go into that, but I want to go back into my the part of my script that I did prepare for you guys. And it's the only part of the rest of this live stream that is already prepared, aside from a speech that I want to read as well. But and for any of you that are joining us, I want to welcome you as well to this Freedom Friday, which will be about the main event of this will be about two brave Marine soldiers and their sacrifices. There are a number of differences in regard to the potential weekly Freedom Friday event compared to previous live streams I have done in the past. And this is in regard to earlier. First is that it would be weekly. This means there would be a dedication on my end to be more active with you on a scheduled basis. This requires a lot more preparation work on my end, but I am okay with it because I think you are worth it. I totally lost my place here. Oh. As a direct and positive consequence of this potentially being a weekly event, it would give all of you something to look forward to. I acknowledge that there are people going through rough times, and something uplifting to look forward to might be the thing they need to get through the week. If the Lord grants me with such an incredible opportunity as that, then I am truly blessed. It would be an incredible opportunity. It'd be a great honor. It's really what I mean. Another difference is Freedom Friday would potentially be a continuous conversation that could build up to a monumental portion or proportion. We all come from our own life experiences, backgrounds, worldviews, and everything else that makes us individual human beings. We all have our own concept and perspective of what freedom is, and each one is equally important. I look forward to learning more about yours as I share over time about mine. A final difference that immediately comes to mind is advanced interaction with you. What I mean by this is, since the topic of this potentially ongoing weekly event will always be about freedom, it gives you the opportunity, if you choose, you don't have to obviously, hence freedom, it gives you the opportunity to compile your thoughts ahead of time and add them to the growing discussion. And I will look forward to interacting with you in the conversation. Let's go back to the live chat, and please forgive me if I do not get to your comment, as the live chats always seem to be more busy than I can keep up with at times. So, with that said, Shiloh says, "Ouch! I had neck problems. It sucks. Glad you have a good chiropractor. Thank you. I appreciate that, Shiloh." Janine says, "You will be in my prayers. My back is hurting as well, so I can commiserate. You will be definitely in my prayers." I appreciate that, Janine. I really do. Jeff says, "The military receives the highest budget in the country. I don't think they need help." And Jeff, you're correct. Well, that could be debated, and I'm not going to go into that debate because that's not what this live chat's really about. But when I say to the military in general, I'm actually talking about nonprofits that assist in helping those who are in active duty or are veterans in the past, those that which the VA and whatnot don't get to, and their reason. I'm not even going to go into that. But there are organizations out there like Wounded Warriors, for example. They reach out to those and whatnot. Janine says, "I used to work for the VA, and believe me, there is a need. I come from a long line of veterans, and they deserve it." And I agree, Janine. They definitely do. Maggie says, "Me too, Janine, including my husband." And you know, I think that's fantastic. And Maggie, thank your husband, if he's alive, I'm assuming. But thank him for his services for me. I greatly appreciate that. Let's see. Oh, Tucker Poon says, "What do you think of Ghost Wolf Art making a mockery of the Christian faith with his constant lies and scams using God as a media form?" You know, that's a good question. I think there might be some legitimacy to the question, although I'm just gonna say this. You know, art, in the concept of freedom, art has the freedom to do what he chooses. We do have free will, after all. And whether they are intentional mockeries, whether they are perceived as mockeries, or whether they're just accidentally portrayed that way, you know, I think that's left to everybody's judgment. I don't want to speak badly about art because, you know, he's been a friend of mine for a long time. I don't always agree with the way he does things, and neither does he always agree with the way that I do things. And that's all I'm going to really say about it. You know, Shiloh says, "Thank you for recognizing the brave men and women who serve in and out of the military." Yeah, and they deserve it, Shiloh. They deserve it and more. And then Maggie says, "Yes, the families of military members that need it. Yes, and thank you, Garrett. He has a terminal illness, but he's hanging in there a lot longer than the docs gave him." Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about that, Maggie, as far as your husband having a terminal illness. But, you know, I'm going to have to keep him in my prayers. And I have no doubt in my mind that others will be praying for him as well. He definitely deserves it, and I have all the confidence in the world that he worked hard and served his best while serving for our country, and preserving our God-given rights to freedom. Tucker Poon says that's a very political answer. However, if you don't stand against it, you stand for it. Silence is acceptance. You know, Tucker, I don't know if I agree with that. Again, you know, that's all I'm going to say about it, simply because that's not what this topic is about. But I felt that you deserve an answer to your question. And it's not that I'm being silent about it. It's that it's simply not the place for it. You know, perhaps there will be another time where that can be discussed. And quite frankly, you know, it would be much more preferable if he was actually able there to be able to defend himself, because I don't like talking behind other people's backs, and I'm going to leave it at that. And I would hope and appreciate it if you could actually respect that. I want to keep it at that. And then Maggie says, thank you, Garrett, referring to what I said about her husband just prior. You don't know how much that means. Yes, he did. You know, and I have no doubt. And you're very welcome. I wish I could say more. I really do wish I could say more. And speaking of saying more, in regard to the two brave Marine soldiers, I heard about this, you know, quite a while ago. You know, this event happened in 2008, so it's been 9 years, and I'm sure that many of you have also, if not all of you, have actually heard about this as well. Unfortunately, when my laptop decided to go haywire on me, I lost that page, but I'm going to go ahead and pull that up because that shouldn't take too long. And basically, it's a speech that Lieutenant General John Kelly gave. I think it was back in either 2011 or 2014. I can't remember exactly, but it's such a touching speech, and it's a reminder of how amazing the military really is. And I do want to get into that, but real quick, since we're on the topic of freedom, and will, as far as I'm concerned, always be on the topic of freedom for these Freedom Fridays, I want to get into the Merriam-Webster definition of what freedom stands for. Now, keeping in mind that these definitions, I think, and just like with any Webster's dictionary or any dictionary definition of any given word, should be taken with a grain of salt. And there's reason why I say that. Firstly is the fact that a definition or a word that's added to the Merriam-Webster's dictionary it's only the real requirement for it is to simply be used in a word to be used in written form 10,000 times, and then it can become a legitimate word or a legitimate type of definition. And with that kind of grounding, it fails to honor something called truth. Perhaps there is truth in it, but it doesn't necessarily always mean that there is. So because of that, I just take any type of definition that's given by the dictionary with a grain of salt. And of course, if I have some sort of ground to test it with, then I can define whether or not it's true. So what we have for the definition of freedom, and they come in two different categories. The first is the quality or state of being free. Well, that should be a given. But it says the quality of or absence of being free, or the quality of absence, the quality or state of being free, such as the absence of necessity, coercion, or constraint in choice or action. Okay. I don't know if that's necessarily freedom or a consequence of freedom, but I can agree to a point with that. Liberation from slavery or restraint or from the power of another. Again, I think that's more of a consequence of freedom. The quality or state of being exempt or released, usually from something onerous. Or onerous, there we go. Maybe it's onerous? Onerous? I don't know how to pronounce that word. Another definition is ease, facility. What? Really? Now here's where it kind of gets a little ridiculous. The quality of being frank, open, or outspoken. Improper familiarity. Boldness of conception or execution. Unrestricted use. Yeah. Yeah. But there's a second category of the definition of freedom. And if I can be honest with you guys, as I always try to be, this one I find a bit annoying. I really do. And I think you'll see the reason why I find it annoying. Especially if you, much like myself, if you're from this country, which the majority of people who watch my videos are, not all, but the majority are, excuse me, you'll understand where I'm coming from here, as far as the annoyance is concerned. The second definition, or the second category of definition, it's 3 words. It's a 3-word description of freedom, and that is a political right. Like, really? A political right. And I can kind of understand where they're coming from. And I try to look at everything from a neutral palette, so the reason why I say that I can kind of see where they're coming from when it comes to calling it a political right. And it only works in this way, at least in my opinion, it only works in this way. And that's if one holds the American Constitution as a political thing. But then that begs the question, is the Constitution political? And I have my own thought, and of course, I may not be thinking about it properly, just like I might be thinking about all of these definitions incorrectly, because I'm flawed, I'm fallen, I'm a human being, I'm not perfect. But the way that I look at the Constitution, and this is not to call this a political conversation, because none of my videos I try to make political at all. So the Constitution to me is a foundation. It's not a political thing, it's a foundation. And it is politics that can use the Constitution as a means for their political boundaries. So it being a political right could only work if one incorrectly looks at the Constitution as a political item, and it's not. It's a foundational item, at least the way that I see it. In fact, according to the Constitution, it recognizes, and I'm not going to necessarily go into it here, and we could in another Freedom Friday, but the way that I've studied the Constitution, and in fairly reasonable depth, is that it recognizes, especially when you look at the Declaration of Independence along with the Constitution, it recognizes that freedom is a God-given right, not a political right. And that's all I'm going to say about that, but there are the definitions given to you straight from Webster's Dictionary on what freedom is. Do I agree with them? The first few, kind of, at least in part. Let's go back to the live chat for just a moment, and my battery's already running low. Really? This is terrible. I haven't even gotten into the good stuff yet. So I might have to pull out an extension cord or something. Yeah, let me just go ahead and do that real quick. I'm sorry, guys. I had a lot more battery prior to my laptop giving me so much trouble earlier. But I've got 7 minutes to get this done. In fact, actually, no, I still need to grab my my AC adapter because I didn't grab it. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and do that real quick and I'll be right back. So bear with me and then we can go ahead and get back to the live chat ordeal. Yeah. And hey, Tumbleweed. Okay. Sorry about that. Uh-oh, looks like I might be having some internet issue. Alright, now My apologies for that. Let's go ahead and go back to the live chat here. And Shiloh says, freedom can be defined as being able to choose your responsibility. And I can agree with that. It's at least part of what freedom stands for is choosing what you're responsible for. And let's see here. Janine says, I used to carry a copy of the Constitution in my pocket all the time and have it memorized. That's very impressive. And then Jeff says, despite the differences in our opinions, we should be thankful to even be able to talk about freedom. Most of the world can't freely. And I agree with you 100%, Jeff. In fact, that's part of why I wanted to read a speech that Lieutenant General John Kelly gave several years ago. And let's see. Maggie says, that's one part of being an American that we should all be proud of and hold on to. And I agree. Driving my home. Oh, this is a great question, by the way. Do you think the Constitution should change for modern times? And I'll answer that. I have an interesting answer, I think. And I would imagine that a lot of my friends would probably disagree with me, but then again, a lot of my friends don't hold to the same values that I do in the political spectrum. And again, this isn't a political thing. And speaking of non-political things, I need to refill my fireplace here pretty soon. But I'm going to say that, first of all, the Constitution has had modifications done several times. That's why we have amendments, because they were things that the Constitution did not originally cover, and so there needed to be clarification on what the Constitution stood for on certain subject matters. Now, in regard to such amendments and the original Constitution document, should those things be changed? Not unless there is absolute merit for it. Like, let's talk about the First Amendment first. Freedom of speech. Should that be taken away from us? No, not at any time. You know, as much as I disagree with a lot of what happens in the media, you know, their right to freedom of speech, although they may not deserve it a lot of times, I'd still fight to the death for them to have it, because it is a right. It's a God-given right, and the Constitution does not get to clarify what those freedoms are, but it gets to recognize them. And if we start making changes to just to modernize it because our society has changes from time to time, or progressively all the time, depending on the culture of the area where we live, if it started to change, if we started to change everything based on where society is going, then what are we holding to that will serve as a foundation? You know, after all, you know, much like a wise man once said, it is not wise to build a house on the by the river on the sands, or on the sands by the river, because it will eventually just be washed away. Better to build a house on the rock. And the reason why is because if we just have a free-flowing Constitution that just goes with the times, then our society, this greatest nation on God's green earth will have no foundation. It will have no boundaries, really. There would be no boundaries because they could just change. Part of freedom is knowing where restrictions lie, or knowing where the boundaries should be set. And that means that the Constitution should also rely on certain recognizable foundations, such as the fact that God gave us freedom. Yeah. So no, I don't think that the Constitution should change for modern times. And if you don't necessarily agree, that's okay. There are a lot of people that would not agree. I would hope that you would agree. And that's not for my sake, but for the country's sake. Because, I'm pro-America. That's, and that's the here and now of it. That's the here and forever about it. So long as I live here, I'm going to be all about what's best for America, not what's best for our conveniences as a society. Because let me tell you something, not all conveniences are beneficial. Let's see. And then Janine says, actually, before I get to that one, Jeff says, you must be in the van. I thought you were in the house. Anyway, good talk. I am in, I think I mentioned earlier, I am in my vehicle. And you can probably see the mist exhausting from my mouth as this noise box speaks. My fireplace went out, so the heat is going away at a rapid rate, and that's fine. I'm not cold yet, and it takes a lot for me to get cold, so I will refill my fireplace when I get a moment. Janine says, we do have a system set up for amendments if necessary, and I agree with that, and there are times when it must be adjusted, but I think it has to been interpreted so far that some rights get negated. And yeah, I would think that's fairly accurate. Let's see. And then Maggie says, I'm pro-American too, Garrett. Awesome. And then Drive My Home, who asked that original question, says, I totally agree. And that's great. I'm glad. Martha says, yes, Maggie, we need to converse, not just one way, talking at each other in this country. I'm assuming that has to do with another comment she mentioned that I might have skipped over. And that's fine. Shiloh says, while I'm Canadian, I'm grateful for a good neighbor. And you know what? We're grateful to have Canada as a neighbor too. Considering the fact that Canada is more leans towards socialism, I wouldn't say that they're completely socialist. Some people might. I wouldn't say that they're totally socialist because they have a lot of freedoms that most socialist countries don't allow. They've got a very impressive setup as far as the way that they run things. And I'm not going to say that I'm some sort of pro and know everything that happens in Canada, because I don't. I really don't. But from what I do know, because I do have friends in Canada, it's actually fairly impressive. I still will take the constitutional model, but I'd take Canada as a secondary if necessary. So with that said, and since I'm at least somewhat caught up with the live chat, and by somewhat I mean I had to skim through all of them, but I'm up to date. I want to get into a speech that Lieutenant General John Kelly gave, and this was several years ago. And it's touching to the heart. It really is. And it's such a speech that I consider, it reminds me as if I need to be reminded, but it really does remind me and puts things into perspective on how fortunate we are, who are Americans, to live in such a country that recognizes our God-given right to freedom. It's a long speech, and by long I mean it'll take me probably about 7 minutes to read, so I hope you don't mind. I want to actually read it. In fact, I think I'm still in the process of loading it up. But yeah. So I hope you guys don't mind. I really want to read it because when I first heard the speech, and I'm going to pull up the transcript, but when I first heard it, yeah, it just, my jaw dropped. I'm just like, wow. I imagine that most of you have heard this speech, or at least read about it, but, and if you haven't, here's a perfect opportunity. Because, you know, like I said, I regard the military, law enforcement, firefighters, emergency response, I regard them in the highest respect. And this article called 6 Seconds to Live, which Lieutenant General John Kelly wrote, is an example of why I place them on such high respect. And it reads something like this. And this is from Lieutenant John Kelly's perspective here. Our country today is in a life and death struggle against an evil enemy, but America as a whole is certainly not at war. Not as a country, not as a people. Today, only a tiny fraction of American families, less than 1%, shoulder the burden of fear and sacrifice, and they shoulder it for the entire nation. Their sons and daughters who serve are men and women of character who continue to believe in this country enough to put life and limb on the line without qualification, and without thought of personal gain. So the sons and daughters of the other 99% don't have to. No big deal though. Marines have always been first to fight, paying in full the bill that comes with being free for everyone else. The comforting news for every American is that our men and women in uniform are as good today as any in our history. As good as their heroic, underappreciated, and largely abandoned fathers and uncles were in Vietnam, and their grandfathers were in Korea in World War II. They have the same steel in their backs and have made their own mark, etching forever places like Ramadi, Fallujah, and Baghdad. I hope I'm actually pronouncing some of these correctly. Fallujah and Baghdad in Iraq, and Helmand and Sanjin and Afghanistan. That are now part of U.S. military legend and stand just as proudly alongside two Jima, Normandy, Incan, Hue City, Khe Sanh, and Asu Valley, Vietnam. While some might think we have produced yet another generation of materialistic and self-absorbed young people, those who serve today have broken the mold and stepped out as real men and real women who are already making their own way in life while protecting ours. They have learned at the same time they have served and fought for us that the real strength of a platoon and a battalion or a country is not based on worshiping at the altar of diversity or separateness. On the contrary, they know that our immigrant and cast-off ancestors, many of whom came here in chains, forced a nation that was a melting pot stitched together by a shared sense of history, values, customs, hopes, and dreams, all which unified an earlier America into a whole, as opposed to an unruly gaggle of hyphenated names or multicultural individuals. Forgive me, I still only have one contact in because of my earlier issue with my scratch corneal. Our servicemen and women also come to understand that it's not about color, but about character. That it's not about where in the world you come from, but all about why you came. That it's not about the God you worship, but that you will respect and even fight for the right of your neighbor to venerate any God he or she damn well pleases. That it's not about individual achievement, but all about achieving together as a people for the common good. That there is an exceptionalism about America, and that we should cherish who we are and why we are extraordinary. Those of us who serve or have served in America's armed forces have a profound understanding of these truths. Unfortunately, many in our great country today seldom fully appreciate them or even hear of them beyond rhetoric every couple of years. And what are they like in combat in this war? Like Marines have been throughout our history. These young people demonstrate their commitment to us not in words, but in action. In my 3 tours in combat as an infantry officer and commanding general, I never saw one of them hesitate or do anything other than lean into the fire and, with no apparent fear of death or injury, take the fight to our enemies. And let's see. We can also take comfort. Let's see, is this where I wanted to go? Yeah. At least I thought that's where I wanted to go. I'll just read where it came off. There was a section where I took out just because it kind of wasn't off key. But anyway, as anyone who has ever experienced combat knows, when it starts, when the explosions and tracers are everywhere, and the calls for the corpsman or medic are screamed from the throats of men who know they are dying, when seconds seem like hours and it all becomes slow motion and fast forward at the same time, and the only rational act is to stop, get down, save yourself, they don't. When no one would call them a coward for cowering behind a wall or in a hole, slave to the most basic of all human instincts, survival, none of them do. It doesn't matter if it's an IED, a suicide bomber, mortal attack, sniper, fighting in the upstairs room in a house, or all of it at once. They talk, swagger, and most importantly, fight today in the same way America's Marines have since Tun Tavern. They also know whose shoulders they stand on, and they will never shame any veteran of any service, living or dead. We can also take comfort in the fact that these young Americans are not born killers, but are good and decent young men and women who, for going on 10 years, have performed remarkable acts of bravery and selflessness to a cause they have decided is bigger and more important than themselves. Only a few months ago, they were delivering your paper stocking shelves in the local grocery store, serving Mass on Sunday, or playing hockey, or local ice. Like my own 2 sons, he says, and one he actually lost himself in combat. Like my own 2 sons, who are Marines and have fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, they are also the same kids that drove their cars too fast for your liking and played the god-awful music of their generation too loud, but have no doubt they are the finest of their generation. Like those who went before them in uniform, we owe them everything. We owe them our safety. We owe them our prosperity. We owe them our freedom. We owe them our lives. Any one of them could have done something more self-serving with their lives, as the vast majority of their age group elected to do after high school and college. But no, they chose to serve, knowing full well a brutal war was in their future. They did not avoid the most basic and cherished responsibility of a citizen, the defense of country. They welcomed it. they're the very best this country produces and have put every one of us ahead of themselves. All are heroes for simply stepping forward, and we as a people owe a debt we can never fully pay. Just yesterday, 2 were lost. This was back in 2008, as I mentioned earlier. Just yesterday, 2 were lost, and a knock on the door late last night brought their families to their knees in a grief that will never go away. Thousands more have suffered terrible wounds since it all started, but like anyone who loses life or limb while serving others, including our firefighters and law enforcement personnel, who on 9/11 were the first casualties of this war, they are not victims. They knew what they were about, and were doing what they wanted to do indeed. They were in exactly the place they wanted to be among the best men and women America produces. The chattering class and all those who doubt America's intentions and resolve endeavor to make them and their families out to be victims, but they are wrong. We who have served and are serving refuse. I froze up for a second here. There we go. So we who have served and are serving refuse their sympathy. And the kind of their sympathy. I have a story I wish to relate about the kind of people they are, about the steel in their backs, and the kind of dedication they bring to our country. When I was the commander of all U.S. My laptop is acting up on me again. And I completely lost it. Hold on just a minute, folks. Sorry about this. My laptop has a mind of its own sometimes. But it will come back at some point. Come on. Silly Internet Explorer. Alright, I hope you all can still hear me. My Internet Explorer decided to go for a dive, and it does this on occasion. This is a really terrible laptop. Shame on you, Asus. You usually do a much better thing. Much better product most of the time. Anyway, if you guys can all hear me still, which I'm assuming that you can. In fact, I could just check for myself. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get back to... I lost that page again. So I need to load it back up, because Internet Explorer is awesome, or Microsoft Edge, whatever you want to call it. They're both ridiculous in my opinion, but it's what I use. So... bear with me here for just a moment. Alright, I have the page pulled up. Now I need to find where I left off. Okay. I'm just going to backtrack just a little bit because it just makes things a little bit easier. This has been an interesting live feed. Thousands more have suffered terrible wounds since it all started, but like anyone who loses life or limb while serving others, including our firefighters and law enforcement personnel who on 9/11 were the first casualties of this war, they are not victims. They knew what they were about and were doing what they wanted to do. Indeed, they were in exactly the place they wanted to be among the best men and women America produces. The chattering class and all those who doubt America's intentions and resolve endeavor to make them and their families out to be victims, but they are wrong. We who have served and are serving refuse their sympathy. I have a story I wish to relate about the kind of people they are, about the steel in their backs and the kind of dedication they bring to our country. When I was the commander of all U.S. and Iraqi forces on April 22nd, 2008, and this is Lieutenant General John Kelly again. On April 22nd, 2008, 2 Marine Infantry battalions were switching out in Ramadi. One battalion was in the closing days of its deployment. The other was just starting its 7-month combat tour. 2 Marines, Corporal Jonathan Yale and Lance Corporal Jordan Herder, 22 and 20 respectively, one from each battalion, were assuming the watch at the entrance gate of an outpost that contained a makeshift barracks housing 50 Marines. The same ramshackle building was also home to 100 Iraqi police, our allies in the fight against terrorists in Ramadi, known at the time as the most dangerous allies in the fight against terrorists. Known at the time as the most dangerous city on earth. There we go. And owned by Al-Qaeda. My contacts, or my one contact, is playing tricks with my eyes. Yale was a dirt-poor, mixed-race kid from Virginia with a wife, a mother, and a sister who all lived with him and he supported. He did this on a yearly salary of less than $23,000. And actually in one transcript it said only $13,000, if you can believe it. Herder, on the other hand, was a middle-class white kid from Long Island. They were from 2 completely different worlds. Had they not joined the Marines, they would never have met each other, or understood that multiple Americans exist simultaneously, depending on one's race, ethnicity, religious affiliation, education level, economic status, or where you might have been born. But they were Marines, combat Marines, forged in the same crucible, and because of this bond, they were brothers as close or closer than if they were born of the same woman. The mission orders they received from their sergeant squad leader, I'm sure, went something like this. Okay, take charge of this post and let no unauthorized personnel or vehicle pass. You clear? I'm also sure Yale and Herder rolled their eyes and said, in unison, something like, "Yes, Sergeant," with just enough attitude that made the point, without saying the words, "No kidding, sweetheart, we know what we're doing." They then relieved the 2 other Marines on watch and took up their post at the entry control point of Joint Security Station Nazar in the Sofia section of Ramadi, Al-Anbar, Iraq. A few minutes later, a large blue truck turned down the alleyway, perhaps 60 to 70 yards in length, and sped its way through the serpentine concrete Jersey walls. The truck stopped just short of where the two were posted and detonated, killing them both. 24 brick masonry houses were damaged or destroyed. A mosque 100 yards away collapsed. The truck's engine came to rest 20 yards away, knocking down most of the house down before it stopped. Our explosive experts reckoned the blast was caused by 2,000 pounds of explosives. Because these two young infantrymen didn't have it in their DNA to run from danger, they saved 150 of their Iraqi and American brothers in arms. When I read the situation report a few hours after it happened, I called the regimental commander for details. Something about this struck me as different. We expected Marines, regardless of rank or MOS, to stand their ground and do their duty, and even die in the process, if that is what the mission takes. But this just seemed different. The regiment commander had just returned from the site, and he agreed, but reported that there were no American witnesses to the event, just Iraqi police. If there was any chance of finding out what actually happened, and then to decorate the two Marines to acknowledge their bravery, I'd have to do it, because a combat award requires 2 eyewitnesses, and we figured the bureaucrats back in Washington would never buy Iraqi statements. If it had any chance at all, I had to come under the signature of a general officer. I traveled to Ramadi the next day and spoke individually to half a dozen Iraqi police, all whom told the same story. They all said, "We knew immediately what was going on as soon as the two Marines began firing." The Iraqi police related that some of them also fired, and then, to a man, ran for safety just prior to the explosion. All survived. Many were injured, some seriously. One of the Iraqis elaborated, and with tears welling up said, they'd run like any normal man would to save his life. What he didn't know until then, and what he learned that very instant, was that Marines are not normal. Choking past the emotion, he said, "Sir, in the name of God, no sane man would have stood there and done what they did. They saved us all. What we didn't know at the time, and only learned after I submitted both Yale and Herder for posthumous Navy crosses, was that one of our security cameras recorded some of the attack. It happened exactly as the Iraqis described it. It took exactly 6 seconds from when the truck entered the alley until it detonated. You can watch the last 6 seconds of their young lives. I suppose it took about a second for the two Marines to separately come to the same conclusion about what was going on once the truck came into their view at the far end of the alley. No time to talk it over, or call Sergeant to ask what they should do. Only enough time to take half an instant and think about what the sergeant told them to do only a few minutes before. Let no unauthorized personnel or vehicles pass. It took maybe another 2 seconds for them to present their weapons, take aim, and open up. By this time, the truck was halfway through the barriers and gaining speed. Here, the recording shows a number of Iraqi police, some of whom fired their AKs, now scattering like the normal and rational men they were, some running right past the Marines, who had 3 seconds left to live. For about 2 seconds more, the recording shows the Marines firing their weapons non-stop. The truck's windshield explodes into shards of glass as their rounds take it apart and tear into the body of the son of a you-know-what, trying to get past them to kill their brothers. Americans and Iraqi. Bedded down in the barracks, totally unaware of their lives at the moment, depending entirely on two. Marines standing their ground. Yale and Herder never hesitated. By all reports and by the recording, they never stepped back. They never even shifted their weight. With their feet spread shoulder width apart, they leaned into the danger, firing as fast as they could. They had only 1 second left to live. And I think they knew the truck, The truck explodes. The camera goes blank. 2 young men go to their God. 6 seconds. Not enough time to think about their families, their country, their flag, or about their lives or their deaths, but more than enough time for 2 very brave young men to do their duty. Those are the kind of people who are on watch all over the world tonight for you, and as amazing as this selfless act of sacrifice may seem, it is the norm. In all the years I have been both enlisted and an officer of Marines. I have praised them and I have chewed them out. I have promoted them and unceremoniously disciplined them. I have hung decorations on them and court-martialed them. I have visited them mangled and broken in military hospitals around the country, in lonely defensive positions across Iraq and in brigs. I have known thousands of them for over nearly 40 years, and I can tell you without hesitation or qualification that I never met one who would have run from the post that morning. Who would have done anything other than to have stood there and died? I have the name of the most recent hero, killed in Afghanistan a few hours ago, and actually that's talking about his son. Anyway, it goes on, but 6 seconds to live. It's and all of that to save the lives of 150. Had they moved away from their post, all of them, presumably, would have been killed. Let's go ahead and go back to the live chat here, assuming that it's still going. I think it is. Yeah, it is. Sorry about that. I'm looking at my screen showing it paused, but I paused that because I didn't want to hear myself talk. In fact, I probably have to go quite a bit further up. Here we go. Driving my home says, I'm in my van too, kind of chilly. It is chilly. Let's see here. Driving my home says, glad he's the chief of staff. I agree. I completely agree with that. Janine says, this is bringing me tears. Yeah, totally understand. Totally understand. Maggie says, I'm already crying. It goes to all of you are in my heart and head. Yeah. Janine says, these young men can't even drink, but they will fight. Absolutely. Actually, one of them was old enough to drink. One was 20 and one was 22. But regardless, yeah. Shiloh says, God bless those willing to protect our freedom. Absolutely. And it goes on and on. Tons of comments. But the important thing, or not the important thing, the next question is, okay, great speech and all, and it is a great speech. It is probably one of the best speeches that I've read in the last few days. But the question is, why read this? I mean, and what does Freedom Friday even have anything to do with Houseless on Wheels, or living in a van, or living in any vehicle, really? What does this have anything to do with that? It kind of goes away from all the van build videos that I have done in the past, and it does. But I would say that this has everything to do with van life or nomadic lifestyle in general, because it is acts like those two brave men that allow for me and everybody else who chooses to have the freedom to choose this lifestyle. Whether or not it is illegal to sleep in your vehicle is irrelevant, because that is actually something that does not play a part in the Constitution, which is what the military upholds and defends, and that's what government is for, is to defend and preserve our rights. And so far as I'm concerned, county rules about sleeping in a vehicle are irrelevant. But another reason why it has something to do with the channel is because they deserve the airtime. Every single person who serves this country and protects our freedom, because we have the freedom to make our choices on how we want to live, absolutely has everything to do with this channel. So that's why I think that's why I wanted to read that speech. And there are plenty more where that comes from. And not every Freedom Friday will be about a speech of the military or about law enforcement or about firefighters or what have you. But nevertheless, there are plenty to go through. Back to the live chat before we have to end this fairly quickly. Thankfully, my friend is running a little late on his job site. But Shiloh says, integrity, courage, and honor, I could use more of all that. And believe me, I'm the biggest example of needing all three of those things. Biggest of them all. Maggie says, I wish this speech was spoken or read aloud in schools. The young people need to hear this. And you're right. And hopefully some of them, if they have the patience to stick all the way through this live stream, they might actually be able to hear it. They might. But you're absolutely correct. And there are plenty of speeches which I've collected over the years that should be going into this public schools as well. And yeah, anyone who, if there's ever anyone who ever wonders why I look so highly upon military as well as local enforcement, that's why. That's exactly why. That is why I will walk up to an officer or a firefighter or an EMT and I will shake their hand and thank them for their service, because I know darn well that they're putting their lives out in the line every single day so I can walk down the street a little bit safer. There was something else I wanted to say about that too. And I completely forgot. Yeah, this is why I wish I was a little bit more prepared, but understandably there's a reason why I'm not as prepared, because of chiropractor. Had to actually go in twice. But I think that's just about where I wanted to go with this edition of Freedom Friday. I really want to try to start it around 5:30 next Friday. But don't be surprised if I decide to do another live stream here in the next couple of days, because I'm going to want to test out my new mixer that I just got. So yeah, just don't be surprised if that happens, which means I'm going to have to play around with my settings all over again. Maggie says, the way you think is why I follow you. Well, thank you, Maggie. I appreciate that. Same with you driving my home, saying amen. Awesome live chat. I appreciate that. Like I said, all the money that is earned through this live chat, whether it be YouTube ads or super chat or whatever, it's all going to go to some sort of organization where they assist in active and veteran people of the military. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and edit here because I'm pretty sure he's going to be ready to go at this point, and I need to meet up with him. I already kind of promised him that. So yeah, thank you everybody for watching and for putting up with all these slight unorganized aspects of things, but you know, I pulled it through. I was getting a little frustrated there for a minute when it came to, I was like, now maybe we'll just try this whole 6 seconds to live speech next week, but I'm glad that we all persevered. So thank you everybody for joining in. You know, you're always in my thoughts and prayers, and yeah, so thank you for watching. Take care, love others as you love yourself, and I'll see you next time.